The first thing Daniel Turner noticed was the silence after she laughed. It happened during a Monday morning meeting in a glass office building in downtown Chicago. Someone made a weak joke, polite smiles followed, and then Emma Collins laughed warm, natural, unguarded. For a brief second, the room felt lighter. Then it settled back into routine. Daniel noticed because moments like that had become rare for him. At 46, Daniel had learned how to disappear in plain sight. He sat near the end of the table, suit pressed, posture calm, speaking only when needed. He did his job well, maybe too well. People respected him, trusted him, but rarely tried to know him. That was fine. Respect felt safer than hope. Emma, on the other hand, stood out without trying. She was 31, sharp, confident, and full of energy that didn't feel loud or careless. She asked questions others avoided. She stayed curious. She believed conversations mattered. Daniel noticed her early on, though he would never admit it. He noticed how she greeted the security guard every morning, how she listened with her whole face when someone spoke, how she didn't rush out of the office at 5 but didn't pretend work was her whole life either. Still, the thought came quickly and settled deep. She's too young. That single idea shaped everything that followed. When Emma joined his project team, Daniel kept things clean and professional. He answered emails with polite efficiency. He stayed focused in meetings. When conversations drifted toward personal stories, he found a reason to look at his phone or check the time. Emma felt it immediately. She was used to many reactions from many interests, confidence, sometimes ego. Daniel gave her something else entirely: distance. Not cold, not rude, just careful. As if there were an invisible line he refused to cross. At first, she assumed he was just private. Then she noticed patterns. He never sat next to her. He never asked follow-up questions about her life. He always ended conversations first. It made her curious in a way she didn't expect. One afternoon, the team decided to grab coffee from a place across the street. Emma waited for Daniel to join them. "Coming with us?" she asked casually. He smiled, kind but firm. "I'll catch up later." He didn't. As she walked back to the office, coffee warm in her hands, Emma felt something close to disappointment. Not because she needed his attention, but because she sensed there was more beneath the surface and he wasn't letting anyone near it. Days passed. Work continued. Emails, meetings, deadlines. But small moments kept pulling them into the same space. They ended up waiting for the same elevator. They left late on the same nights. They shared the same quiet break room after long days. One evening, rain pressed hard against the windows and the office emptied early. Emma found Daniel standing alone, staring out at the street below, holding a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. "Looks like the weather one today," she said. He turned, surprised, then relaxed. "Seems like it." She stayed. They talked about work at first, then drifted into safer topics, favorite books. Cities they'd lived in, small habits that made days better. Daniel spoke slowly, thoughtfully, like he didn't waste words. Emma listened closely, not interrupting, not rushing. Something shifted. For the first time, Daniel felt seen without being examined. But even then, he kept his guard up. When Emma mentioned a concert she wanted to attend, he nodded but didn't ask more. When she laughed at something he said, he smiled but looked away. Every instinct told him to pull back before things grew complicated. Before he wanted more, Emma noticed. As she gathered her things to leave, she paused near the door. "You know," she said, not accusing, just honest. "You don't have to keep stepping away." Daniel froze. "I don't know what you mean," he said carefully. "I think you do," she replied. "You talk like someone who expects not to be understood." Her words stayed with him long after she left. That night, Daniel sat alone in his apartment. Lights low, city noise humming outside. He replayed the conversation again and again. He hadn't planned to let anything show, yet she had noticed anyway. Because Emma was paying attention. The next few days were different. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just closer. Emma asked him to lunch. He said yes before thinking too hard about it. They sat across from each other in a quiet restaurant, sunlight catching the edge of the table. She asked about his past, and for once he didn't deflect. He talked about his early career, a long relationship that ended quietly. The strange feeling of time moving faster than expected. He didn't overshare, but he didn't hide either. Emma shared her own story dreams that changed, mistakes she learned from, moments she wished she could redo. She didn't talk like someone chasing youth. She spoke like someone who valued growth. Daniel felt something stir that he had buried years ago. Hope, that frightened him more than anything. He started noticing how easy it felt to be around her, how natural their conversations were, how much he looked forward to seeing her name pop up in his inbox. And that's when the fear took over. You're imagining things. She's just being kind. Don't confuse attention with interest. So he pulled back again. Emma felt it. And this time, she didn't ignore it. After a company networking event, they walked together toward the parking lot. The city was quiet, lights reflecting off wet pavement, the night calm and open. You always act like you're holding something back, Emma said. Daniel stopped walking. Emma, he said, choosing honesty for once, you deserve someone closer to where you are in life. Ugh. She turned to face him fully. Why do you think that? Because I'm not where you are, he said. Because I'm older. Because I've already lived parts of life you're just starting. She studied him for a moment, then spoke softly. You don't get to decide what I want. The words hit him harder than any argument could have. I see how you listen, she continued. How you care. How you show up. I don't see age. I see depth. Daniel looked away, heart pounding. Depth comes with weight. Not afraid of weight, she said. They stood there, close but not touching, the air between them full of everything unsaid. Daniel realized something then. He wasn't protecting her from disappointment. He was protecting himself from rejection. And for the first time, he wondered if the story he had told himself that he was too old to be chosen was nothing more than fear wearing logic as a disguise. As Emma walked to her car, she glanced back once, a quiet question in her eyes. Daniel watched her leave, knowing one thing for certain. This was no longer about age. It was about whether he was brave enough to let her see him fully. Honestly, without deciding the ending before it even began. The first time Daniel felt hope, he tried to ignore it. After that rainy evening, the air between him and Emma had shifted. He couldn't pinpoint exactly when it happened, but suddenly her presence mattered more than it should have. Her laughter, once just background to office routines, became something he looked forward to. Her voice, even when speaking about mundane things, stayed with him long after meetings ended. Every day he found himself noticing little details, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when thinking. How she sipped coffee slowly, savoring it like she had all the time in the world. Emma, meanwhile, wasn't holding back. She had felt the distance Daniel had put up and refused to let it define their connection. She leaned in, but carefully, respectfully, not rushing, not forcing. She started asking questions that invited stories, moments that required honesty without fear of judgment. She remembered things he mentioned weeks ago, things no one else had cared about. She shared her own experiences, the choices that had shaped her, the mistakes that had taught her, the quiet victories that made her proud. Every word she spoke seemed to build a bridge Daniel hadn't thought he deserved. At first, Daniel stayed cautious. Old habits die hard. He kept conversations polite, his emotions carefully contained. But Emma had a way of slipping past defenses. One afternoon, they found themselves working late in the office. The hum of computers around them, the city lights spilling through the windows. They talked about the strangest things books, childhood memories, favorite childhood snack sand. Daniel realized how effortless it felt to share small pieces of himself without fear. Then came the moment that changed everything. They were leaving together after another long day, walking down the quiet streets, umbrellas clashing in the drizzle. Daniel tried to keep the mood casual, but his words betrayed him. You always act like you're waiting for permission, Emma said, calm but direct. He stopped. Permission for what? he asked, already knowing the answer. For happiness, she said. Daniel felt a pang in his chest, the simple truth hitting him harder than he expected. She wasn't accusing him. She was reminding him that he deserved what he wanted to. He took a deep breath. Emma, you deserve someone closer to your stage in life. Someone younger, someone who hasn't carried as much. He gestured vaguely. Someone who doesn't have all this history weighing them down. She looked at him carefully, eyes soft but firm. Why do you assume age is all I see? He swallowed, admitting quietly, because it's all I see in myself. Emma took a step closer, but didn't touch him. When I look at you, I don't see a number. I see someone who listens, someone who shows up, someone who makes me feel safe being myself. That's what matters. Daniel felt a weight lift slightly. He wanted to believe her, but years of self-doubt had trained him to question every compliment, every gesture, every small connection. You don't know what you're choosing, he said, almost a whisper. I know exactly what I'm choosing, she replied, and I wish you'd stop deciding for me. Her words stayed with him in the days that followed. Daniel began to notice how little he needed to hide around her. How effortless it felt to share moments. How much he wanted to include her in his world. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to imagine a future where he wasn't holding back. Where he could simply be present without fear of judgment. Emma noticed the subtle changes too. He started staying a little longer in conversations, lingering just enough that she felt noticed. He began to smile without restraint, laugh freely, and even tease lightly. She saw the walls he had built around himself begin to crumble. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was quiet, like sunlight slowly spilling into a room that had been dark for years. They began to spend more time together outside of work, carefully, thoughtfully. Lunches became dinners. Shared errands became long walks through the city streets. Coffee runs turned into small adventures exploring hidden corners of Chicago. Each moment deepened their connection, slowly dissolving the fear Daniel had carried for decades. He discovered that he didn't have to be young to feel alive again, to be seen, to be wanted. One night, months into their growing friendship, they found themselves at a small jazz bar. The music was soft, the crowd distant enough to give them privacy, and the dim lights painted a gentle glow over the room. Daniel watched Emma as she listened, eyes half closed, smiling at a joke she remembered from earlier. He realized then how much he wanted to share every moment with her. Every laugh, every silence, every conversation, without fear of time or judgment. I've spent so long believing I was past my chance, Daniel admitted quietly. His voice barely audible over the music, that I almost missed you. Emma leaned her head on his shoulder. And I spent so long hoping you'd see yourself the way I see you, she said softly. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic confessions. It was about presence, understanding, and acceptance. They didn't need the world to approve. They only needed each other to feel understood. In the weeks that followed, Daniel stopped doubting himself. He stopped measuring his worth against age or past experiences. Emma had shown him that connection and intimacy didn't belong to youth alone. They belonged to hearts willing to see and be seen. Evenings turned into late nights of conversation and laughter. Weekends became adventures, small trips to nearby towns, quiet evenings cooking together, reading side by side. Every ordinary moment was extraordinary because it was shared. They encountered glances from coworkers, whispers from friends, and questions that sometimes tested their confidence. But each time, Daniel remembered Emma's words, "You don't get to decide what I want." He remembered how she had chosen him, not despite his age but including it, embracing the depth and history he carried. As their relationship matured, it wasn't defined by fear or hesitation. It was defined by trust, respect, and the thrill of finding someone who understood without needing every detail explained. Daniel learned that love wasn't about being perfect or fitting a certain mold. It was about honesty, courage, and letting someone in, even when it felt risky. By the time spring arrived in Chicago, Daniel and Emma had built a connection that was strong, patient, and real. Daniel no longer feared rejection because he realized the real risk was never opening his heart at all. Emma didn't seek to change him. She simply accepted him. That acceptance became the foundation of their love. One evening, sitting on a park bench, watching the city lights reflect on the river, Daniel looked at Emma and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "I almost let fear decide for me," he said quietly. "I almost missed this." Emma smiled, brushing her hair from her face. "And yet, here we are," she said. "I chose you. I always have." In that moment, Daniel understood something he had never truly believed: that love doesn't follow a schedule, doesn't care about numbers, and it certainly doesn't ask permission. It waits patiently for those brave enough to notice it, for those willing to risk fear for connection. Their story didn't need fireworks or dramatic gestures. It needed patience, honesty, and courage. It needed them to prove to themselves that assumptions could be wrong, that hope could be real, and that two people willing to see each other fully could create a life that was deeply meaningful. Daniel Turner, once convinced that age was a barrier, discovered the truth. The right person sees everything, not just the years. And for Emma Collins, choosing him wasn't a compromise, it was a recognition of the man he had become. The man he was, and the man he could be with her. Their love grew slowly, steadily, with laughter, conversation, and quiet moments of understanding. It was a love that proved life didn't end at 46. And that hearts, when brave, could rewrite the story they had always told themselves. Sometimes, the greatest romances are the ones that begin with doubt and fear, but blossom into connection and joy, 'cause someone dared to look past the numbers and see the soul. Daniel and Emma had found that, and nothing else mattered. And so he learned the most important lesson of all. The heart doesn't measure in years, it measures in courage, choice, and willingness to be fully seen. And with Emma by his side, Daniel finally felt that courage, that choice. And that freedom to love and to be loved had always been within reach.